Hello, and welcome to our series on self-marriage. I'm here with Sophie Tanner, who's going to tell us about her self-marriage today. Sophie, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
And let's start with the question of what does self-marriage mean to you?
For me, it's about being responsible for your own happiness. Because I personally had some disastrous relationships where I put too much of myself into my partner. So for me, self marriage was about saying that I'm enough as I am and that I am perfectly capable of a very happy and fulfilling life without needing another half to complete me, as the movies tell you.
Yes, they certainly do. And you got married in Brighton, England during the Fringe Festival. Why did that feel like the perfect place and time?
I mean, Brighton itself is a very quirky city, and I mean, it's the perfect city to marry yourself for a start. But the Fringe Festival takes it one step further, and it's kind of a month's worth of performances and kind of off the wall crazy happenings. So I figured, because it was already happening and there were lots of different tourists from all over were coming to the city, I thought it'd be a really nice staging for this self wedding as kind of one of the, it's like a performative event, I suppose.
It sounds really courageous. I know some people feel shy about their self marriages, and it really sounds like you were willing to put yourself totally out there in front of many people, including people you didn't know. Was that important to you?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, yeah, self marriage could be, or self wedding could mean very different things to different people. So someone might feel that they want it just a solo, just them making affirmations themselves. Whereas for me, it was different because I was making a statement and wanted to create a mind shift, and I wanted to challenge a status quo. I wanted it to be a sweeping gesture, a grand statement, and I wanted an audience to do that. As well as that, I always think it's important in these sort of rituals that you have witnesses and that you declare your vows in front of your loved ones because it gives them more weight in a way. So I feel like for me, it's the state giving it a status of such a big ceremony, a public ceremony, felt important.
Hmm. What were some of the mind shifts that you were hoping to encourage?
To discourage the stigma around being single generally. So that was the kind of, you can't live happily ever after until um, you can't live happily ever after until you've met the one. So I wanted to kind of challenge that, and also to like get rid of the shame that's attached to being single. So turn shame into a celebration, and to make people maybe who are single realize that actually being alone doesn't have to mean that you're lonely, and that that you can have, like I say, a fulfilled life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Some people use the term sologamy. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I think so. I mean, I hadn't even heard of it until I did it, and then
Uh,
yeah, I say sologamy. Yeah.
and is sologamy only will you never marry someone else or partner with someone else, or does it represent something different than that to you?
I mean, again, it's very clearly defined. Self marriage is about your relationship with yourself, and marriage is about your relationship with someone else. So for me, they do feel very separate. But I can understand that people who don't really get it as a concept find that odd. But it's in the absence of any other ritual that we have in our culture that looks at our personal development. So for me, sologamy can happen quite happily alongside a marriage to someone else. Like,
Yeah.
but then I don't know who came up with the word sologamy or defined the rules of it. But
Yeah.
for me, that's the rules. I see it as, I mean, not the rules, that there are no rules.
Well, I love that point because there are no rules, and part of self-marriage is owning that and deciding what your rules are. So even if some people would define sologamy differently, I love that you're defining it for yourself.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And I think that is one of the strongest misconceptions that us sologamists are up against, is the fact that they see it as us denying marriage or like resisting marriage, or you know, fighting against marriage. But for me, it's not at all that. It's just, it exists like independently of the whole idea of marrying someone because you're in love with them and romance.
Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me that you had some nerves before the wedding. Did you expect that?
Um, I didn't really, because I'd organised the whole thing and been really quite positive about it. But I think it did, yeah. The night before, it suddenly struck me that, as you say, it's quite a big public event, and it was quite. I suddenly thought, yeah, it may be perhaps going to be more life changing than I thought, which was correct. It definitely was. So
Hmm.
I was right to suddenly think, gosh, this is actually quite a big statement I'm making. And yeah, as much as it's tongue in cheek and playful, yeah, it was taken as it was. I mean, globally, it had a strong reaction. So yeah, I think those nerves were. I was right to have them.
Yeah. And the realization this could be more significant for me and for others than I thought, was that the root of the nerves?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, it wasn't about the actual. Like, I was really, my friends and family was so supportive and
Hmm.
amazing. I wasn't worried about how the actual day would go, because they were all oh my god, we can't wait. We've got champagne. We've got our dresses. So I felt tons of support from them. Yeah,
Awesome. How did you handle those nerves once they set in?
I stayed in because I was supposed to go out with my with my hens, or my bridesmaids. I was supposed to go out and have drinks with them, but I actually ended up going. No, I'm going to have an early night and stay in so that I don't, so that I'm on form tomorrow.
Mm. And was there did you talk yourself through it at all? Did you do some journaling about it? How did you process it?
I feel well. I just knew that when I woke up in the morning that it would, if I still felt as bad, then I could always just pull it. But I woke up and I felt amazing, so it, so it wasn't a problem from there on.
Cool. Your wedding had so much music and dancing, and you kicked it off with a dance performance, you and your bridesmaids, to Kendrick Lamar's I Love Myself. And not only did you start dancing in the Royal Pavilion Garden, but then you danced your way to the wedding location at the
Yeah.
Brighton Unitarian Church. Why did you choose to start off the day this way?
It's funny because, yeah, I guess because we all got together and rehearsed that dance before even the wedding day. Like, my friend, who's kind of a dance teacher, she had devised it, and then all my bridesmaids were. I said, "Can we get together and make sure we've nailed it?" And I don't know. I guess it's like, because I did study theatre at university level, so I do think it's partly I love that kind of theatrical performative vibe, and what girl doesn't like a synchronized dance? Um, it's just like I love the feeling of dancing through the streets. Um,
Mm.
it's just like that sort of celebratory, getting everyone involved, which they did. There were passers-by who just ended up dancing with us on the way.
Oh,
Um, so that was great. And then when I actually renewed my vows and launched my book 2 years ago now, I actually extended that into a full-on flash mob.
oh,
So
so
we could,
good.
yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, let's make this even bigger and have a flash mob. So
Did people know as they were watching that you were marrying yourself? Did you have a sign or did they just infer it?
um, I guess no, they didn't. So it was just me in my bridesmaid dress. I had my friend dressed as a kind of priest carrying the speaker, and yeah. So they were probably thinking, "What the hell?" But then they were following us. So yeah, they wouldn't have known unless they'd followed me and then witnessed the whole ceremony, which a lot of people did.
Nice. And once you got to the church, your wedding proceeded much like a traditional marriage would, including that your dad gave you away. Was were he and your mom surprised by your decision to marry yourself?
So dad wasn't. He was like, well, because I'd already been starting to write a book on it, so that he was familiar that I was doing that.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, my dad's quite a joker, so yeah, and we often have like big parties together at his, and he, yeah, so he didn't bat an eyelid. He was just like, what am I going to wear? Do you want me to do a speech? And like kind of worrying about his role in it. My mum was like, my mum didn't actually come because she was living like in deep Devon, quite far away.
Mm.
And I think she just didn't really get it. She was like, so, but it's not really a wedding. Like, you know, so she was just a bit like, so she didn't actually come, not because she was really against it, but she just didn't, she was just thought it was another thing, Sophie thing.
Mhm.
That it was only afterwards when I published the book and had all the videos, she was like, oh, I wish I'd been there.
Mm. And did she get it? Did she get the meaning of it, the significance?
She did, and I mean, you know, my mum's had 3 divorces, so if anything, she was like, when she read the book, she was like, "This wasn't a reaction to me, was it?" I was like, "Well, possibly a bit," but I mean, the fact is that you know, I have grown up knowing or witnessing that happily ever after doesn't always happen. So
Mhm.
you know, but yeah, but she's really on board with the whole self love thing. I think she's discovered that in her later years.
Hmm, beautiful. I also loved, and I'm going to pull up a picture of this because it's so fun. In fact, this will be a great time for us to just show some general pictures from the wedding. Pulling this up. Because, yes, your dad walked you down the aisle. We've got a picture of that. And then who he walked you to was a good friend of yours who had a full on, like, red robe. So this is your dad, correct?
Yeah, that's dad.
And sunflowers, what inspired the sunflowers?
They're just one of my favorite flowers because they're so bright and lovely, like the sun.
Hmm, beautiful. And then if we, can we click through? Oh,
Ah,
and this is your good friend. How in the world did he decide on this outfit? It is epic.
it was amazing. We went to a really good fancy dress shop in Brighton and tried on a variety of religious outfits. I
Mhm.
actually have some photos for him, like in different ones. Uh, there was like, yeah, there was the kind of white Pope robes with the little hat, and that. Once he put those on, we were like, okay, that's it. That's the outfit. And I hired it the whole weekend. Yeah, I mean, I love. Yeah, this is my like one of my gay best friends, and I've lived with him for 5 years, and he was just like, Sophie, what are you getting me to do now?
You've made
Love
some references that I'm like, ooh, I think I want to be friends with you. Like, are you doing cool, fun, innovative things all the time? It's kind of what it sounds like.
it. Yeah,
You're like, yeah, that's pretty much my life.
basically, yeah.
And this must be the choreographed dance.
Yes, this is it. The girl in the blue dress is the one who came up with it. So yeah.
Nice. And then what is going on here?
Oh yeah, so that was when because me and James, the Pope, we have done improvised comedy before. So we have done like courses and then performances. Like improv is, you know, very special. And there's one element of that where you have to do everything in slow motion. So
Hmm.
I took that and I thought that would be really good for the throwing of the bouquet. So like getting everyone to kind of do the slow right down and then play the chariots of fire as they were doing it. So it was really funny watching everyone try and slow their catch down. Yeah.
Amazing. And then here it looks like you're giving some important directions.
Very important dance directions.
Excellent. So those are the photos that we have. And so let's come back to this, more details of your beautiful day. James, your friend, read passages from Kahil Gibran's The Prophet. Do you remember
Hmm.
which passages those were and what the sentiment was?
Yeah, it was to do with um I mean, I love the prophet and I actually read a really amazing passage at a friend's wedding recently, which was about two people growing separately, but like separately to each other, but in the same shade. Anyway, he's really good at metaphors, but I think this one was about filling. It's kind of like a filling your own cup type metaphor. So I can't remember it word for word, I'm afraid. But yeah, it was very much about sort of owning your own happiness and filling your own cup.
Love it. And speaking of which, on the day of your wedding and your vows, what were the commitments and promises that you made to yourself?
So I decided to, I mean, because at one point I was thinking to write, because I'm a writer, I thought, oh, I'll write some really new sort of vows. But as I was thinking about it, I thought the fact is I'm borrowing from the format of a wedding for a reason, and I think so by echoing the traditional vows, they have more impact. So I just changed the plural to the singular of, promising to be your own best friend rather than each other's best friend, and facing your disappointments, embracing your dreams, and so kind of making those promises, which actually didn't feel strange at all, because when you do that as a couple, it just held just as much resonance when it was just me stood there saying that I'll do that, and like in sickness and in health, it's that whole thing of kind of you just promising to be there for yourself and to treat yourself with kindness, essentially.
The night before you were nervous because you realized this could have a bigger impact on me than I thought. When during the ceremony did you feel the impact most?
I think it was when I was taking those vows, because it went all quiet, whereas before it'd been jovial. And a few of my friends said they had goosebumps, and it was kind of really, it suddenly felt like this is a really serious thing I'm doing. And, I'd set it up to be as such, but I hadn't, but then it really felt it, as I was saying, I take me to be my wife. And it was kind of like, there was just a big hush. And I was like, wow, it felt like it actually did feel spiritual. And then he said, I now pronounce you wife, and then I was like, yeah, that's when it really hit me that this is like a big thing I'm doing,
Hmm.
and something that I really mean as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So had this realization, and then of course, more dancing.
Of course, everyone joined the first dance because it would be rude not to.
Absolutely. And the song you chose was If You Want to Be Happy by Trini Lopez. And what spoke to you about that song?
So yeah, it's funny. I don't know if you've seen the film Mermaids with Cher and
I
Winona
haven't.
Ryder. That song plays at the end, and it's like them in the kitchen dancing to it. So it's like got a nostalgic, because always me and my sisters would like copy the dance. But as well as that, I always remember as a young girl thinking it's such a happy, fun song, but it's really sexist. But then it's kind of like ironically sexist. So I kind of, because of the whole the the slight feminist statement about marrying yourself as as a woman, not necessarily needing a man, I thought it would be funny to have an ironic song that said, don't ever marry a woman who is beautiful. Basically, that's what that song is about.
Oh
So
man.
yeah, it's got really interesting lyrics where it's like, make an ugly woman your wife, basically. And it's just like funny because it's a popular song, but it's really sexist.
Yeah, so you're like, I'm gonna own that song and give it some new
Exactly.
meaning. Uh-huh. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and then everyone like really embraced it, and we were like singing along the words, and so it was good, kind of an ironic celebration. Yeah.
Some people that I talk to do a honeymoon after their self-marriage. Some people don't. I think yours might be the first international honeymoon that I've discovered. And you went all the way to Ethiopia to do a volunteer project. Why did that feel
That actually changed it. So I was going to go
oh,
to Ethiopia, but I actually ended up going to Uganda. And it was it a year or 2 years later, because I had to save up basically, but it was a dream and I was determined to do it, and I did do it. I went to Uganda gorilla trekking. Yeah, but
beautiful?
I didn't like. I mean, me and my friend who I was with were calling it my honeymoon, and for me it was. But yeah, it didn't happen as immediately after the wedding as I wanted it to.
Well, as we said, there's no right and wrong. You can take your honeymoon 10 years after you marry yourself. And what a beautiful gift that you fulfilled a lifelong dream.
Absolutely, and I actually think there's also quite a lot to be said for, like, when you're on a woman traveling on her own, and that kind of power of like a solo moon. I think it all ties in really nicely, because that was a very independent trip that I organised. So it's kind of, it's nice. It's like I think all women should feel empowered to do that a bit more.
And did you do it with a friend or did you do it alone?
So I went alone out there, but one of my friends at the time was actually working on a volunteer project out there. So I did spend some time with her and met,
Hmm.
like, a lot of the local village that she worked with as well. But I kind of, yeah, it was kind of an independent trip. It wasn't like a tour operator or anything like that.
Nice. When I had my honeymoon, I was in San Diego and I spent part of it by myself and then part of it with one of my nearest and dearest friends. And I think that for those of us who are very, like, our values are community, friendship, connection, it can be so lovely to spend part of our honeymoon with someone that we love or some ones that we love. So it's cool that you also struck that balance for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I think yeah, traveling alone all around the world, it's quite. It's always nice to have someone to sit and have a wine with at sunset as well as finding
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Final question. What advice would you give to someone who's interested to marry themselves but feels nervous or unsure?
I would say it all depends on why you're feeling nervous or unsure. So if you're worried about what other people will think, and if it's all about the perception of you and the criticism of you, or then I would say, you don't have to do it as a kind of huge announcement. You don't have to attract unwanted attention. It can be a very small, personal, individual ceremony. No one else has to even know about it. But then, as I've said, I also think you'll be pleasantly surprised as to how many people do end up supporting you that love you, the people that count. So I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, I don't regret it. If anything, it's made my life much. I feel much more secure within myself and proud of myself, and I think it's something you don't regret, because making that kind of commitment to yourself is it's probably one of the most powerful things you can do. So yeah, but then in terms of like dealing with people who maybe are critical or choose not to understand, then that can be well, contact you or me about if they want to ask about it. It's just something that you can't please everyone, and there will always be haters. So at the end of the day, you just have to see them as irrelevant.
Well, thank you so much, Sophie, for sharing more about your self marriage journey and that very special day. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you.
You too. I'm so pleased to hear everything you're doing.